Hello, friends. Welcome back to GM Philosophy, and this is Tabletop Audit. I'm the GM Philosopher. In this series, I jump into one-shots run by other GMs, and then we watch the session back together so I can offer constructive criticism, commentary, and deeper insights into the techniques and tactics those GMs used to run the game. The whole point of the series is to give you practical, real-world examples of advanced GM tactics you can use in your own games. The mission of this channel is simple: to empower game masters to run better, more meaningful games at their tables. If that's your goal, you're in the right place. This is part of a multi-part breakdown that I'm doing of a one-shot that I played in with a GM named Crossheart. And if you'd like to follow the full series, you'll find the playlist linked below. Quick reminder, this is a respectful space. We're not here to shame anyone or tear other GMs down. If that's what you're looking for, this will not be your vibe. But if you want honest, mature, respectful dialogue about elevating the craft of running successfully, emotionally resonant TTRPGs, then welcome. With that being said, let's dive right in. This is Raiding the Horde by Crossheart, Tabletop Audit, episode 1.2.
All right. You continue on in this awkward dynamic. One of you playing with a ball of yarn, when all of a sudden you hear this like rumbling in the distance. It almost sounds like thunder, but there wasn't any lightning and the lighting has not changed. You then hear kind of like a reverberating echo of what Rashaka and Zota definitely recognize as a roar. And the Kenku goes rigid, looks back at all of you, says, "Ka!" and then whips the horse, which takes off in a sprint. I would like all of you to make a dex save.
Dex save. Let's see here.
23.
I got a 12.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Zoda was
I got an
huddled
11.
in the back of the wagon trying to keep warm and obviously wasn't paying attention.
Yep.
18 for Constance.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. This will be fun. All right. So most of you did pretty well. At the sudden lurch of this wagon, two of you fall over. The poor little kobold who you said was sitting in the back.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yep.
So you kind of bounce up, being not very heavy yourself, and you start to fall out of the wagon before anyone really notices. Fortunately or unfortunately, your Warforged companion falls in your direction, and as you exit the wagon, his metal frame pins your tail against the floor of the wagon, technically catching you, also dealing 1d4 damage to you. Oh boy. He's a very heavy robot and deals 4 damage as he just crushes your tail, albeit saving you from falling out of the wagon.
Now, this was a pretty good, little sequence here. Crossheart basically described us hearing a sound, and then the Kinku whips the horses, and the wagons are going faster, and a couple of people failed a deck save. This all made sense mechanically, and I didn't really have too much of an issue with it. In fact, the way that he described the noise was actually pretty good, just describing it reverberating and stuff. Now, I do wish that, he would have described the wagon moving faster a little bit more in depth. It became a little bit rigid. I kind of felt like, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful of Crossheart in this situation, but as GMs, we have to keep in mind that our descriptions are the windows to the event for the players, and they're only going to kind of comprehend really what we describe unless they have a very vivid imagination that takes it and runs with it. But you can really help by doing things like, you could say, as the wagon is rolling across the snow and you hear the roar, suddenly you hear the snap of the Kinku, whipping the horses, and you feel the lurch as the horses take off. The horses are grunting, their hooves pounding the snow beneath them. You feel the wagon start to shake, and the force of that force of that acceleration kind of pulls back. Everyone roll me a dexterity save. Right. So it's like, we're kind of, and then the people who fail to save, it's like you feel the wagon just shaking uncontrollably beneath you, and you realize you were unable to keep your footing. Looking out the side, you see the snow flying by. There's snow flying in your face as the horses are churning it up in front of you. You see their white tails bouncing all over the place, and it just feels like complete and utter chaos, right? You also hear that roaring, and you hear the crunching of the snow and the wagon creaking and groaning as the wheels turn, right? So it's like, obviously, this is after the fact. I wasn't the GM who made this scene happen. And Crossheart actually did a pretty good job. It was pretty good. I just kind of I found myself failing to kind of really attach to that moment in a way that like stirred me or made it feel real to me. Like the immersion sort of dropped away in that little chase scene because I kind of felt like, oh, this could be such a cool scene. You wouldn't think of that maybe with something as simple as a wagon, gaining velocity as it takes off and the horses start sprinting. But really, there's a lot of potential for the players to feel engaged in that scene. So you want to grip that engagement. And I kind of felt like my engagement level really dropped off at that point because I guess I just didn't really feel connected to the scene. So that would be kind of my constructive criticism there. And once again, no hate to Crossheart. The purpose of these videos is not to try to tear other GMs down, but to have constructive conversations about, basically the experience of the game and how they could be made better. And one thing that comes to mind here is that you want to always make the scene special to at least one player character, right? You always want to try to make a moment of significance. You want it to matter. You have to get the player characters to care, right? And so sometimes it happens through descriptions that describe the action. That would have been kind of one option here. But anyway, let's continue.
Or 300 plus pounds.
Ow! Ow!
Oh, I'm sorry. I lost balance. And he'll try to grab him and get off his tail and pull him back in.
Yeah. You're able to it was a sudden jerk, but now the motion is consistent, so you're able to pull him up no problem. And everyone turns to look at the Kenku. He is very focused on what he's doing.
Notice one thing that Crossheart said right there, and I really want to point this out because I think this is really important, and I think a lot of GMs overlook this. Notice that he said, you all turn and look at the Kenku and notice he's really focused on what he's doing. But he probably didn't mean it like this, but when you say something like this, you really take agency away from the player characters. You never want to force actions onto the players, right? So for example, like I might think to myself, well, I didn't turn and look at the Kenku. Why did the GM say I did? This breaks immersion, and this also takes away from player agency. So one way that you can reword something like this is to say something like, those of you who happen to look toward the Kenku would notice that he looks very focused on his job. You always want to leave agency at that line for the players. You never want to take that away from them. There are some rare occasions where that line will move and it will blur, such as like if someone's under the influence of the suggestion spell and it succeeds against them or something, right? That obviously moves that line, but we always want to be very aware of where the line of agency is, and we never want to overstep that as a game master.
He seems like he knows exactly where he's going, and he has a certain time to get there, you assume. He hasn't been very talkative since you got in the wagon, but you feel the pace has definitely increased. The sense of urgency is there. We are going to do a short little thing that I like to call a skill challenge. So basically, what is going to happen is this is kind of an encounter, but instead of attacking, I will be dishing out skill checks. Everyone will have to participate. So I have 5 skill checks lined up, and I will give them out one at a time, and you will all decide who is going to take that check.
So this is kind of a fun, almost a mini game-esque thing. And Crossheart ran one of these in another one shot I played with him in this skill check kind of game, and you're about to see it play out. But I just want to take a moment and say, as a general rule, I'm not a big fan of these types of skill check type things. I'm not a big kind of fan of this. This was actually fun to do. I'm not saying that it wasn't fun or that Crossheart did a thing that I hated or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. It actually was kind of fun in an almost board game-ish kind of way and in almost like a gambling kind of way. But then, obviously your character's there. And so there's the elements of that incorporated into it. And you want to see the character succeed and what happens if they do and don't. So that's kind of a fun element to it. But I will say that just from an emotionally resonant, elevated TTRPG experience, I would probably stay away from these types of challenges because they really do cross over into that line where you're basically taking all player agency away and forcing a series of skill checks. These players may not want to try to accomplish the challenges in this way. And you're basically forcing them to adopt a very specific course of action. And then you're just forcing them to make checks about it. That is not, I believe, how you would inspire emotionally resonant, engaging role play. That is almost more like a minis game or almost like a combat board game type mechanic. I personally do not like to take my games in that direction. There are instances where this can be very fun. And there are probably players and groups out there who enjoy this kind of like game mechanic. But I'm just going to say that I wasn't a huge fan of this. And while it was fun, I did feel like it kind of took away from me being able to role play my character and find creative ways to solve problems and do things like as that character. And you also have to keep in mind that this is a one shot. So there's very limited time. Sometimes forcing a linear path isn't such a bad idea in a one shot. And so there's got to be some grace given for that. And as players, you have to understand that the GM has to do something to have the story going in somewhat good linear direction so that there's some substance to it. And I believe that this is one tactic that Crossheart was using to try to give us the ability to use our skills and stuff while still moving in a linear direction toward like basically the narrative target. With that being said, I would not have deployed this to do it. It was still fun. No hate on Crossheart at all for this. But now you're going to see this play out. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think of this kind of skill challenge. I basically just told you what I thought of it. So let's keep going.
And once you have, your character cannot contribute for the rest of them. So whoever last, no matter what it is, no matter what the check is, it's yours. So the first check is going to be perception.
Ooh,
I have +4.
I have +3.
I have +2.
I got a +7.
Wait, somebody say +7?
Yes, heart.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, we should probably give that one a heart then.
Can I cast guidance on every skill check?
Sure. Yeah.
Got to give massive respect and props to Crossheart for saying yes to letting the player cast guidance on all of those. Because so that's a quick way. Doing things like that is a quick way to ruin a challenge like this. Like it could almost be argued that it would. You could, in theory, bolster your numbers so much that it would effectively kind of ruin the game. But Crossheart just said yes to it anyway. and kudos to Crossheart because I think that was the right choice. Letting players affect the story with abilities they have is the right course of action, even when maybe you think to yourself, oh, it's going to ruin my plans. And what I always say as a GM is, are the players going to ruin your plans? Good. That means they're using creativity. And see here, this player was using creativity to basically affect the game with abilities that their character had. So boom, really awesome, creative on the player's part. Really big kudos to Crossheart for saying yes to something like this. I think that was the right decision.
Okay, so everyone, you have guidance when you do your skill check.
All right. So, Art, give us a perception with an extra D4, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank goodness I have a D4. All right. With a D4. Oh, gosh.
I mean,
I'm rolling low. All right. 15 altogether.
Hey, you rolled a 7 and ended with a 15. That's not bad. So you, in your short stint outside of this wagon, your analytical mind took in your surroundings. You saw two things of note. You saw what looked to be a large shadow up high in the sky. It was too blocked by the weather to really make out what it was, but it was certainly something large and moving quickly. You kind of assumed that might have been the dragon in question.
So I'm not trying to nitpick, but seeing a dragon's shadow above the clouds when you're riding across the barren, frigid Arctic landscape would be a big deal. I really feel like that moment was underplayed. I really wish Crossheart would have made that a more dramatic moment. And therein, we have the nature of this kind of skill challenge where it's almost more of just like a minis game thing where you're flipping over cards to kind of see what the prize is, and it's not narratively driven. So I kind of feel like that was a big missed opportunity. It would have been really cool to have that be a serious moment because that is a serious moment. A dragon flying overhead. This is even for characters in a D&D game, this is not a situation that happens too many times in a character's lifetime. Like this is a big deal, and I feel like it just got glazed over because of the mechanics of the skill challenge. So that's a little bit of I feel like a missed opportunity. Not to nitpick, mad respect to Crossheart. Of course, that's just my perspective on it. I would have wanted to make that a very dramatic moment, and I feel like it could have deserved it, and it could have been really played up to be super cool. Another thing that I want to point out here is that, that has to do with this, is that we always have to keep in mind that as the game master, we have a great deal of power in what the spotlight is pointing at and in how the characters are receiving that information. So, the characters, but ultimately the players. So, when I just there's a dragon, and I don't make it a big deal, it's not going to be a big deal. The players are likely not going to make it a big deal, right? If we want big deal moments in our games, if we want big dramatic moments, then what we want to do is set them up correctly, right? We want to set up circumstances. We want to set up the right thing to show, and then we want to show it in a dramatic, big, larger than life fashion through the mind's eye, through the theater of the mind of the player characters. Sometimes you can use visuals, maybe a picture, on the VTT, whatever. But the most powerful thing is to set it up and then to show it with dramatic effect through those descriptions. And sometimes it's less about the actual tactile descriptions and more about the feelings that you evoke. So for example, you could talk about the way the wingspan just blocks the sun. And even though there's that layer of clouds, you can kind of see the silhouette of that dragon form overhead, massive, the size of 3 castles. And when the wings flap, wind just buffets across. I mean, it threatens to tear the top of the wagon right off, and it's not even an attack. It's just the wind. A dragon so large that his eye is probably the size of this wagon. Whatever it is, right? So it's like you can evoke emotions by describing some of these effects, and that's what you want to do. You want to evoke emotion. You have to ask yourself, if my spotlight things are not evoking any kind of emotion, am I really succeeding as a game master? And I believe that if you're trying to run a transcendent, emotionally resonant game, the answer is no. We need players to care. We need them to care. How do we get them to care? We have to elicit emotion. We actually need to get them feeling things. And once they start feeling things, they start to care more about the story. So there's my 2 cents on there's a little dissertation about that because I think it's so important.
The other thing you saw, you locked eyes with a couple of Yetis.
So that was super random. That there's a dragon and then you lock eyes with a couple of Yetis. So right now there is so much going on in the scene. There's so much, and I have to say that I kind of wish in order for me to have cared about the scene, the best way I could have cared about it would have been for eliminating the skill challenges, but then also instead of having several different things happening. So there was the wagon accelerating, there was the sight of the dragon overhead, there's the Yetis now, and then there's going to be more things you're going to see. I kind of wish that there would have been one notable encounter or sighting. It could have been the dragon or it could have been the Yetis. And I wish more time would have been spent cultivating emotional dramatism around that. I think that would have been a better use of time in game space. So as it is right now, it's we didn't even get to think about the dragon, this is huge dragon thing up there, because now we're locked eyes with Yetis, right? So it was so fast paced, so much going on, but yet there's because there's so much in there, there's not time for that dramatization of it and to delve into the emotions of it. And I feel like this whole scene for me was a little bit of a miss. Again, no disrespect to Crossheart. I'm not saying I did not have fun. I'm talking about the emotionally resonant art of running TTRPGs that really grab human engagement and emotions. So anyway, let's continue.
As you pulled yourself back in to the wagon, you then kind of hear them chasing after you. So the next check you will have is survival. Who wants to take it? The heart is out.
I'm
Who's
plus
next
3, so I
item?
can take it.
Okay, that'll work. So give me
God.
a survival check.
And then a
You
D4
have
for
guidance.
guidance.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
you do have a D4.
I mean, it's it's not really going to help. 8 total.
Okay, 8. So you're trying to think of a way to get these Yetis off your tail.
Now here again, we have that situation where there's kind of agency being taken away from the player. Crosshair said, you're trying to think of a way to get these Yetis off your tail. This happened so fast. We didn't even know that the Yetis were dangerous. They're probably dangerous, but we didn't even know. We haven't really been, even described, the Yetis haven't really even been described. And now, it's your character's trying to think of a way to get them off your tail. That is really pushing it in terms of player agency. I would never want to say that to a player character because I don't want to control their thoughts, right? They're in control of what they're thinking. One way that I approach this in my games, and I've learned to approach this, is to say something like, now, I don't know what your character, thinks of this situation. I don't know. However, there would be a tempting thought in the back of your mind. Maybe we should try to get away from them. I do not know if your character thinks that, but as that thought, that temptation plays at the edges of your mind, here's some information that you realize about that, right? So we can kind of usher in that information without crossing the line into player agency. We want to leave that agency line, let players control their characters, unless they're under the effect of a mind control spell or something like that, right? But anyway, let's continue.
The only thing that comes to mind is you could distract them with meat, and the only thing in your vision that you can think of is your kobold friend.
This is the same thing. Like, this is kind of funny. Like, your kobold friend, Waz's character, the Coda, the little kobold, like, you could toss him out at them. It's kind of a funny thing. But in all seriousness, though, again, we have kind of the same agency situation. It's like the only thing your character can think of is this. That's really taking a lot of control of the character away from the player, which can create real feel bad moments. So you never want to take player agency away from character agency away from the player. It can create very feel bad moments. And when players lose control of their character, then really they have zero emotional grounding in the situation of the game at all. And you really threaten to eliminate all engagement. You threaten to eliminate immersion. You threaten to eliminate all the emotional connections they have. And it can just make players angry. It can make players very angry to lose control of the characters, and for good reason, because they have no control over anything else. The player character that's the whole reason they're engaging in the hobby, is to, play the character. So anyway, I'm just mentioning that's kind of a dangerous breach of agency kind of there. I would stay away from that. With that being said, a quick little pause before we keep going. If you want to see how I run my own games, there's a link to my Start Playing profile in the description. You're welcome to join one of my campaigns and experience firsthand how I strive to make every scene emotionally rich and impactful. I have several games open right now, including a superhero game and my Darkest Dawn campaign, so it's really awesome. Make sure you click on that link and check it out. If you want to go even deeper into the philosophy behind everything I talk about here, check out my book, The Advanced Art of TTRPG Game Mastery. It digs into emotional resonance, depth, and intentional storytelling at a much higher level. That link is also down below. Also in my description, you'll find links to a free ebook, my top 10 tips ebook. I would encourage you to download that. That's basically 20 plus years of game master wisdom condensed into 10 quick tips, 10-minute read to help you level up your next game session literally overnight. And there's also a link to our free Discord. The GM Philosophy Discord is over 500 GM strong. Come join us and take part in awesome things like this, where we run one-shots, we do contests, we have conversations and discussions, all based around the philosophy of empowering game masters to run better games. And of course, if you want to support the channel and you appreciate the content and community, then do me a big favor. Help me to grow this channel by hitting that thumbs up button, click that subscribe button, leave me a comment, and you can even buy me a coffee on my Ko-Fi Buy Me a Coffee page. A link to that is in the description as well. Every little bit helps to keep the channel going and growing so we can make it bigger and better than ever. Thank you so much for all of you awesome people who support me every single day. And thank you so much to Crossheart for agreeing to run this one shot. I am so pumped to be able to do this. And once again, even though I'm offering some constructive criticism, please never ever think that I'm trying to talk bad about Crossheart. Crossheart is an awesome dude, awesome GM, and I'm so honored to have shared screen with him. So this is all just about mature, breaking down the gameplay, basically trying to make games the best that we can make them. So with that being said, let's dive right back into the video.
Just saying it's an option. However, they are definitely gaining on you. So the next check is going to be intimidation.
I have a +6, and I can use thaumaturgy to give me advantage.
Nice.
Ooh, okay.
Go that way.
Yeah, I guess
I could persuade them, but that's about it.
Yeah, you're not sure how talkative they are.
I'll do the intimidation. That is a 21.
Oh my gosh. Okay, what do you want to do to scare these things away from you?
I'll probably just yell at them in Infernal. I bet Infernal
Ooh,
probably
okay.
sounds creepy.
Yeah, so you find the vilest thing you can think of in Infernal, which is not hard, and you just scream it at them. And they're close enough that you can kind of see their faces, and their expressions go from hunting prey to, you don't think Yetis can pray, or they do pray, but if they did, they have certainly been convinced to start. The rest of you are not really sure what he said, but whatever it was, it scared the Yetis away from you. They are no longer following behind. So that certainly helps your situation. The next check is going to be investigation.
Ooh, I can help with this one. Zoda reaches into his component pouch and pulls out a magnifying glass. Gives him advantage on investigation.
Beautiful. And you also have guidance.
So investigation. So 17 and... Oh, that's not even with advantage, is it? I better roll again for advantage just in case. Oh, even better. 22 plus the 4. Guidance. 4. 26 total.
Oh my gosh. So during this whole encounter with your Yeti neighbors, you saw the gears turning in Constance's head earlier, and you thought, the back of the wagon is not the place for me. So you moved up to the front.
So as this goes on, I mean, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. I've already kind of talked about the agency issue in this kind of skill check thing, but I kind of felt like this took the agency thing to a whole new level, basically saying in the past tense, oh yeah, your character had moved to the front, when he didn't really have a chance to get a decision about that with his character. So I just want to point that out again. That's kind of another one of those agency type situations going on.
Closer to your Kenku friend and further away from the opening in the wagon. And as you did, you saw in front of you, you see a small, it's more like the outline of a small building. It's still very windy, but there's enough light that you can kind of see the silhouette of a small one-story building, which really wouldn't stand out in the first place. The part that does intrigue you is the tornado that is surrounding the building. And with your insight, you immediately can tell this is not a man-made tornado. This is not a natural tornado. This is protection. This is a shield from the outside. So you assume this building is your destination.
For the record, I'd like to say that the idea of having a building surrounded by a tornado, when that building is going to be the dragon's hoard, which is what we find out it is later on, not to spoil it, but that is actually pretty cool. I think that was a cool imaginative thing. Crossheart does think of some really cool kind of like out there ideas that I probably wouldn't think of. And so just from a creative standpoint, that's a really cool thing, like a cool barrier, kind of a cool thing to put around your dragon hoard to make it difficult to reach. I like that. It's out in an abandoned area, and then there's literally a tornado surrounding it. Who's going to get through that? So that's pretty creative. I like that.
And for the last check, I believe is Rashaka. So you get the history check.
Oh.
Okay. I'm going to give you a bardic inspiration. It's a D8.
Excellent. All right.
And you can also roll the D8 with advantage.
Nice. Okay. So
and you have the D4 from guidance.
Here we go. I'm rolling my history check. Did it pop up on
Oh, yay.
Oh, yes, it did.
Okay, so
not bad.
got that, and then we're gonna roll I get guidance and a D8 with advantage, right? I'm gonna go ahead because this seems pretty important. Oh, that's actually a pretty good roll. Okay.
Oh.
There's the second one, not as good. And then the guidance roll. There we go. So I guess it'd be a total of, it'd be 23 for the history check.
Very nice. Wow, I was not expecting that.
I want to pause here for a minute, and I just want to. So, Crossheart does this thing where he said, and he just did it right there. He says, "Oh wow, I wasn't expecting that." Almost like praising the good roll, right? We cannot escape this idea that players look up to the game master. The game master is the one running the game. Players want inherently, and this is something that players may not even think of or realize is happening, but players want the game master to like the stuff they're doing. They want the game master to be impressed with what they're doing because they are kind of like an authority figure in the situation. They are the one running the game, and when a player does a thing and the game master, and they believe that the game master legitimately thought it was cool or liked it or whatever, this is very rewarding to the players. So as game masters, we can take a note from this, from Crossheart's book here. Crossheart has a way of making players feel really good when they accomplish things, and that is actually a very powerful emotional thing. It makes players want to continue to engage. That right there was a great example of how to do that, and I think every GM finds their own way to do that. This is Crossheart's way of doing it, but as game masters, it's really important for us to pay close attention to what the players are doing, reward them for the good choices, for the cool choices, the things you like. Reward them for that with praise. Sometimes just as simple as saying, "Oh, wow, that's cool. Like, actually, that's a really good idea," or whatever, right? Whatever it is, finding a way to stick that praise in there is a very good tactic. It is a good practice, and it's something that Crossheart does really well, and something you can take from his playbook, kind of to make your own games better. All right, let's continue.
So, as you approach this building with this magical barrier around it, Rashaka, you have heard of this place. You didn't think you would ever actually see it in person, not because you never come to the tundra, but because you know nobody wants to come to this place. This is a prison, or used to be a prison. This was a prison out in the middle of nowhere called Tundra's Lament. This was basically death row. You came here for the end of your life. No prisoners have ever survived. No prisoners escaped. And you assume it's a fitting place for a dragon to keep its hoard.
That was a really good description of that. Like that skill check yielded actually a really high quality result there. And there are two reasons why it's high quality. Number one, because it wasn't a big lore dump. Crossheart delivered a few lines of information, but the lines of information he delivered, and this goes in the second part, were actually emotionally impactful. Like the way he described it, he's like, "This is where you've heard of this place. You know, nobody wants to go here because of, this is where prisoners go to die. Basically, this is a terrible place. Tundra's Lament, this prison. Not only is it a cool creative idea and concept, and it's cool that again, my character had heard of it because of the good history check, but it was a really good decision that Crossheart made to make that a concise description, but also the information that he chose to include was very well chosen, in my opinion, for emotional impact. So that's a very, very good win. Big win for Crossheart there, with a great description of something, resulting from a history check and a very small but impactful lore dump.
But you're not sure if you don't think it's still in operation, but there's only one way to find out.
All right.
All right. But with that, you all pull up, and the Kenku stops the horse in the front of this prison surrounded by a magical barrier.
As I watch back and I watch Crossheart run his game, there are a couple thoughts that come to mind in a bigger overarching sense. I realize that Crossheart seems to want to deliver an experiential game to the players that is not so different maybe from like a video game in some sense, right? So, and I don't know if this is the intent, but this is kind of something I noticed. I noticed that, there's a lot of situations where you don't really have control over your player character. Think about in the first scene of Skyrim, when you're in the wagon with the other prisoners and you're being, wagoned along, the other players are talking to you. You can kind of look around, but you don't really have any control over your character yet. This is like a scene that's happening and you're observing it. And then eventually you are put in this place and then they're moving your character around. And once again, it's more like you do have a character, but you're just watching things unfold until you get to a certain point where you do have control of your character, and then you can move around in a limited sense and kind of like make decisions. There's some elements of that I feel like Crossheart puts into his games. And I don't know if it's in his longer term campaigns too, because I've never played a long term campaign with him, but just as one shot. And so there's a thought that this might be a style. This might actually speak to his style of gameplay. And keep in mind that, GMs are going to have different styles, right? And while I am not inherently a fan of that style, and it would probably frustrate me in a long-term campaign, make me feel like I don't have near enough agency. In a one-shot, it was a fun experience. And it's also important to note that different GM styles are still valid. There are game masters who have all kinds of different types of styles, and there are probably going to be players out there who are going to like some styles more than others. I can tell you with 100% certainty that there are players out there who do not like my style. I have gamed with many, many people in my life at this point. I mean, I've probably gamed with, it's been dozens at least, maybe even over 100 people at this point. So many of my games have been with the same people for years at a time. But, I can tell you with 100% certainty that not every single player I've tried to play with jived with my play style, right? No matter how much some people might like my style, there are going to be others who it's just not for. And this is one of the beautiful things about this hobby, is that just like there are people who like different kinds of movies and different kind of video games, people like different types of TTRPGs. So even though I'm providing some constructive criticism here, there's a note for Crossheart that I want to get across here. And it's not only for Crossheart, but it's for other gamers too. Some of my criticisms are aimed perhaps at the style of game you're running. And you might have in your mind, but that's my style. I have a concept for a game and that's the way I want to run it. I'm giving constructive criticism or critique through the lens of my style, right? Which is emotional resonance, complete agency. I want to run transcendent games. Okay. So with that being said, keep that in mind. Don't let criticisms that don't take your style into account derail your style if it works for you and if your players enjoy it. Because the truth is, we can always get better no matter what our style is. but it might be true that you don't have a style problem, and you make little adjustments within that style, and you might really elevate your game. See, so anyway, those are some final notes. And with that being said, that's going to conclude episode 1.2 of Tabletop Audit. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for when I drop episode 1.3. And friends, that's going to be it. I will see you on the next one.